In 2004, a massive earthquake deep in the Indian Ocean triggered a tsunami that just, well, it violently reshaped the entire coastline of Sri Lanka.
It really did.
And in a single afternoon, this act of God achieved what a heavily armed standing military had completely failed to do for, over 2 decades.
Right. It just crippled them.
Exactly. Completely crippled the naval logistics of one of the most feared and sophisticated insurgencies on the planet. I mean, nature fundamentally altered the trajectory of a civil war.
It's one of those really profound historical moments, It reminds us how fragile military strategy actually is.
Absolutely.
You can spend 30 years building up this militant organization, fortifying all your choke points, stockpiling weapons, only to have the ocean literally swallow your infrastructure in about 20 minutes.
It's mind-blowing. And that intersection where raw military strategy collides with unpredictable acts of nature and deep psychological grievances in ancient history, that is exactly what we are wading into today.
Yes, we have a lot to cover.
Welcome to this custom-tailored deep dive. Today, you, our listener, are stepping right into the shoes of both a geopolitical analyst and a military historian. We have a massive stack of source material covering the Sri Lankan Civil War, tracing all the way back to the 6th century BC, right up to the final brutal resolution in 2009.
But our mission today isn't just to read off a timeline. I mean, a list of dates is useless if you don't understand the machinery driving them.
Right. Totally useless.
So we're going to map the anatomy of a prolonged conflict. We want to convert this raw chronology into a connected story. We're looking at the events, asking why they happened, examining the immediate consequences, and then pulling back to see the long-term strategic effects.
But before we go any further, we need to make a very clear, very explicit disclaimer directly to you, the listener. The source material we are working with today details a history of severe, devastating, and highly politically charged conflict involving diverse ethnic and political groups.
Yeah, and we want to be crystal clear here. We are taking absolutely no sides today.
No.
We are not endorsing any viewpoints. We are not validating any political claims. And we are certainly not passing moral judgments. Our role is strictly analytical. We are purely acting as impartial guides to help you digest the provided chronological source material.
Exactly. We are dissecting the mechanics of history, not debating its morality. Which brings us to the central question we are trying to solve today, right? How did historical, political, and military events transform an identity issue into a prolonged, devastating conflict?
To really answer that, we have to build a mental map for you to hold on to. A timeline with 9 distinct checkpoints.
Okay, let's lay them out.
Number 1 is ancient identity. Think of the Vuk here as the roots. Number 2 is colonial transformation, so the borders drawn.
Right.
Number 3, post-independence policies, or the paper walls. Number 4 is ethnic alienation, which is the fracture. Number 5 is militancy, the spark. Number 6, civil war, the fire.
The fire.
7 is external intervention, the third player. 8 is peace attempts, the false dawn. And 9 is the final resolution, the hook there is the vice.
Okay, let's unpack this. We can't really understand the fire without looking at the bedrock it was built on. So checkpoint 1, the roots.
Right. The sources push us all the way back to the 6th century BC, noting the arrival of Aryans in Sri Lanka from the regions of Odisha and Bihar in India.
Wow, so way back.
Way back. Then we jump to the 3rd century BC. Emperor Ashoka of India sends his son, Monk Mahindra, to the island.
And that is a massive cultural anchor point, right? I mean, The arrival of Monk Mahindra establishes a deep, enduring Buddhist heritage that becomes essentially inextricably linked to the Sinhalese identity on the island.
Exactly. But the timeline doesn't stop there. It notes that by the 12th century AD, there's a clearly established demographic domination in the north and east of the island by Tamils.
Which sets up an incredibly complex psychological landscape. You have narratives of indigenous dominance and early arrivals clashing with established centuries-old demographic realities in very specific geographic zones.
And when claims to the land stretch back millennia, it creates a really powerful sense of historical memory. That memory is the raw material that modern political insecurities are built out of.
It's essentially like having two roommates who are pointing to entirely different centuries-old leases for the exact same apartment.
That's a great way to put it.
Neither lease is necessarily fake.
Yeah.
They both have deep historical validity, but they completely contradict each other regarding who actually owns the master bedroom today.
Yes, exactly.
But if those demographic and boundaries were essentially fluid, or at least coexisting, for thousands of years, how did the British arrival in 1833 and 1837 permanently freeze these tensions?
Well, the catalyst was colonial intervention. The arrival of Europeans in the 16th century AD begins to shift the dynamic, but the real structural earthquake happens in the 19th century.
The border's drawn.
Right.
Hmm.
In 1833, the island officially becomes a British colony named Ceylon. And by 1837, the British introduce major development projects, specifically the plantation economy.
Let's unpack the mechanics of that, because this isn't just about the British showing up and planting flags. They wanted to grow coffee and later tea on a massive industrial scale.
Huge scale, yeah.
But my understanding of the sources is that the local Sinhalese peasant population, who had their own land and traditional agricultural practices, had absolutely zero interest in working as punishingly low-wage laborers on British estates.
You've hit the nail on the head. The British had a massive labor shortage for their plantations. So what did they do? They looked across the Pak Strait to southern India and began importing desperately poor Tamil laborers by the hundreds of thousands.
Hundreds of thousands.
Yes, and this is a crucial distinction. These are often referred to as Indian Tamils or upcountry Tamils, completely distinct from the Sri Lankan Tamils who had been living in the north and east for centuries.
So the British effectively re-engineered the demographic map of the island overnight, just to serve their own economic bottom line.
Pretty much.
Suddenly, you have a massive influx of a new population. It's no longer just an ancient debate about who was there in the 3rd century BC. It's a rapidly shifting, engineered reality.
And that engineered reality breeds immediate political insecurity. By 1920, decades before the British even leave, the Sinhalese political leadership is already arguing for federal status.
Wow, that early.
Yeah. They are looking at the demographic shifts and the colonial administration's tendency to sometimes favor minorities in civil service roles, which is a classic divide and rule tactic, and they feel threatened in their own historical homeland.
The lesson for the listener here is fascinating. Geography might be destiny, but colonial borders and the demographic engineering that came with them are the match.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the paper walls. Because once the British left, these ancient and colonial tensions didn't just vanish. They were suddenly written into the very laws of the newly independent nation.
Right, the cascade of post-independence policies. Because when Ceylon gains independence on February 4th, 1948, those colonial tensions are suddenly transferred into the hands of a sovereign government. And what we see over the next 2 decades is the systematic construction of legislative walls.
Let's trace this cause and effect chain carefully, because this is where the identity insecurity metastasizes into something incredibly dangerous.
Okay.
In November 1948, just months after independence, the government passes the Ceylon Citizenship Act. The very next year, 1949, brings the Indian and Pakistan Act. Then in 1954, the Nehru-Kotawala Pact aims to restrict illegal immigration. How do these laws actually function on the ground?
They function by demanding documentation that simply didn't exist for a huge portion of the population. The 1948 Citizenship Act required individuals to prove that their fathers or grandfathers were born in Ceylon.
Which sounds standard until you think about who it affects.
Exactly.
Okay.
If you were an impoverished Tamil plantation worker whose family was brought over by the British in the late 19th century, you didn't have birth certificates. You had no paper trail.
So by passing a law that sounds bureaucratic on paper, the state effectively and retroactively renders hundreds of thousands of Tamil plantation workers entirely stateless.
Yes.
They draw a circle of belonging, and a massive group of people are suddenly stranded outside of it, just legally erased.
And that's just the political exclusion. Then we move to bureaucratic and economic exclusion. In 1956, a huge watershed moment occurs. The government passes a law making Sinhala the sole official language of Ceylon, explicitly removing Tamil from that status.
I want the listener to really put themselves in the shoes of a local liver living through this. So what does this all mean for the average person? It feels like the rules of a board game are being rewritten while you were in the middle of playing it.
It really does.
Imagine you are a 40-year-old Tamil civil servant. You've worked in the post office or the courts your entire life, communicating in English or Tamil. Suddenly, a law is passed saying every government document, every police report, every civil service exam is now exclusively in Sinhala.
The immediate effect is you lose your livelihood. You are locked out of state employment. If you go to a police station to report a crime, you can't even read the forms. It's not merely a cultural slight, it is a profound economic disenfranchisement.
It's a message.
A very clear message. The state does not operate in your language, therefore the state does not belong to you.
And the friction from that is instantaneous. The timeline notes that in 1958 there are major anti-Tamil riots. But interestingly, the chronology also highlights something else in 1958, government-patronized colonization of ethnic Tamil areas in the East.
Right, this is the geographic exclusion layer. The government began sponsoring the settlement of Sinhalese farmers into the eastern province, which had historically been a heavily Tamil and Muslim demographic area.
Okay, so shifting the map again.
Yes. From the state's perspective, they were developing agricultural land. But from the perspective of the Tamil population, the state was actively trying to alter the demographic facts on the ground, fracturing their spatial reality to dilute their voting power.
So we have political exclusion with citizenship, economic exclusion with language, geographic exclusion with settlements, and then the legal walls close in on the youth.
In a big way.
In 1964, the Indo-Ceylon Pact sees India agree to repatriate 500,000 Tamils back from Ceylon, literally shipping the stateless population away. And then in 1970, we hit the education policies.
Right.
The timeline states that a law is passed mandating Tamil students must score comparatively higher marks than Sinhalese students to get admission into professional courses like medical and engineering.
This policy was known as standardization. To understand its mechanics, you have to look at the education landscape. Historically, thanks to early missionary schools in the north, Tamil students had very high rates of admission into prestigious university programs.
Okay.
The government argued that rural Sinhalese students were at a disadvantage, so they didn't just ask for higher grades, they actively weighted the university entrance scores based on the language medium of the exam and the geographic district.
That is staggering. It's essentially implementing a grading curve specifically designed to penalize one demographic's historical success. Education is the ultimate ladder for social mobility. If you lock a generation of youth out of becoming doctors and engineers purely based on their ethnicity, you are backing them into an incredibly dangerous corner.
And this is the core strategic lesson of this phase. When a state uses legislation to systematically isolate a group from citizenship, language, geography, and education, it removes every legitimate avenue for redress.
The political system is just no longer a viable path.
Exactly. And when you close the democratic relief valves, the pressure has to go somewhere. It forces the marginalized youth to find extra legal means of survival.
Which catapults us right into checkpoint 5, the spark, the rise of militancy. When the paths to becoming a doctor or recognized citizen are blocked, the frustration inevitably finds a new, violent outlet.
Exactly. In 1972, the same year, Ceylon is officially renamed Sri Lanka. A man named Vallupillai Prabhakaran forms the Tamil New Tigers.
The T.
Right. We are witnessing the critical evolution from political grievance to radicalization to an armed movement. In the early 1970s, these are small, nascent militant groups operating in the shadows. But the state's response repeatedly fuels their narrative.
Take 1973, for example. The timeline notes that police violently break into the World Tamil Conference being held in Jaffna. This wasn't some militant training camp. It was an international, cultural, and academic gathering.
Right, a cultural event.
By using state force to crush a cultural assembly, the government proves the militants' point.
Yeah.
Peaceful expression is no longer tolerated.
And the radicalization accelerates. 2 years later, in 1975, Prabhakaran assassinates the mayor of Jaffna, who was seen as a collaborator with the state. This marks a real shift toward targeted political violence.
By 1976, the lines are drawn even deeper. Prabhakaran officially forms the LTTE, the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam. Simultaneously, a political entity called the TULF, the Tamil United Liberation Front, is formed. And the TULF actually does quite well initially, right?
They do. In the 1977 national elections, the UNP, the ruling Conservative Party, wins, but the TULF emerges as a major opposition party in parliament.
That's a vital detail. It shows that in 1977, a political track still existed alongside the militant track. Many people still hoped for a democratic solution.
But the state quickly neutralizes that hope. In 1978, the Sri Lankan constitution is amended to vest sweeping, centralized powers in the presidency. That same year, the LTTE and another militant group, TLO, are officially banned.
And then we reach March 13th, 1981. Here's where it gets really interesting, listener. We're looking at military timelines, but the destruction of books acts as a major catalyst. A Sinhalese mob burns down the Jaffna Public Library.
They didn't just burn a building, they reduced over 90,000 volumes of Tamil literature, ancient manuscripts, and irreplaceable historical documents to ashes.
It's horrific. It's like pouring gasoline on an already smoldering identity crisis. Strategically, burning books isn't a military tactic, it's a profound act of psychological warfare.
Yes.
If you are a young Tamil teenager sitting on the fence about whether to join a political party or a militant group, watching your cultural heritage go up in smoke under the watch of state forces, That's a wrap.
It convinced thousands of youths that the state wasn't just targeting their political rights, it was actively trying to annihilate their cultural existence. The destruction of the library functioned as the ultimate recruitment tool for the LTTE.
And while the youth are radicalizing, the political avenues keep shrinking. In 1982, President J.R. Jaywardene extends the life of Parliament to 6 years, completely bypassing regular general elections.
The pressure cooker is sealed shut, the democratic valves are welded closed, the cultural heritage is burning. All it takes now is one spark to blow the entire island apart.
Which brings us to July 1983, the point of no return. We are now entering Eelam War I, the fire. And we need to understand the mechanics of how a localized insurgency explodes into a full-scale civil war.
Right. On July 23, 1983, the LTTE ambushes a Sri Lankan army patrol in the north, killing 13 soldiers.
Now, in the grand scheme of warfare, a tactical ambush resulting in 13 casualties is a localized skirmish.
Yes, it's the subsequent reaction that alters the course of history. The state's failure to contain the fallout leads directly to the Black July pogrom.
Let's look at the terrifying scale of Black July. Between July 25th and 27th, we have the Welikata prison massacre. 53 Tamil inmates are brutally murdered by Sinhalese inmates, and the sources indicate this happened with the complicity, or at least the assistance, of prison authorities.
When the state's own maximum security apparatus becomes a site of ethnic slaughter, the social contract is completely broken, and it bleeds out into the streets. Throughout August 1983, mobs roam Colombo and other cities.
It's just chaos.
Over 3,000 Tamils are slaughtered. Businesses and homes are systematically looted and burned.
And the demographic consequence is massive. Over 150,000 Tamils, 1.5 lakh, are forced to flee their homes, creating a massive wave of internally displaced persons and refugees heading to India in the west.
This is the operational story of Eelam War I. You have a tactical ambush by insurgents, followed by a disproportionate civilian reprisal by mobs and state elements, which results in mass displacement.
And what does mass displacement of traumatized, disenfranchised youth create?
An exponential boom in militant recruitment. The LTTC didn't win a military campaign in 1983. They triggered a state overreaction that essentially handed them an army.
It's a devastating self-fulfilling prophecy. So the war is officially on. By 1984, the government tries to hold an all-party conference to resolve the problem, but it's too late. In February 1985, the LTTE attacks a Sri Lankan military camp in Kokali in the Mullaitivu district.
Notice the geography shifting. Mullaitivu is in the Vani, the dense jungle heartland of the north. The LTTE is beginning to assert control over rural territories.
Okay.
The scale of the violence forces international eyes onto the conflict. In July and August of 1985, India brokers the Thimphu talks, bringing the Sri Lankan government and 6 different Tamil militant groups to the negotiating table in Bhutan.
Wait, let me pause you there. 6 different Tamil groups. Because that brings up a wild, incredibly dark turning point in the chronology. April 1986. The timeline states that the LTTE violently destroys TILO, EPRLF, and PLOC.
Yes.
These are all other Tamil militant groups. I have to push back here. The LTTE is fighting a massive war against the Sri Lankan state, but they suddenly turn around and destroy their fellow militant groups. Why weaken your own side?
To a conventional military thinker, it makes no sense. But Prabhakaran was thinking about the long-term mechanics of an insurgency. He understood that a fractured insurgency is vulnerable.
How so?
If you have 6 different groups, the state intelligence apparatus can easily pit them against each other, bribe their leaders, or co-opt them into a watered-down peace deal.
So it's about monopolizing the violence.
Precisely. By ruthlessly hunting down and assassinating the leadership and cadres of TILO, EPRLF, and PLOT, Prabhakaran ensured the LTTE was the sole, uncontested representative of the Tamil cause. He eliminated any alternative voices.
It prevents a divided front, sure, but it cements a terrifying internal culture. If you will slaughter your own ideological brethren for dominance, it means you brook absolutely zero dissent. You either follow Prabhakaran or you die.
That internal consolidation makes them incredibly dangerous. By March 1987, the militant groups offer talks if the military ceases operations. But the LTTE's actions speak otherwise. In April 1987, a massive bomb detonates at the main bus depot in Colombo, killing over 100 civilians.
Which forces the state's hand. In May 1987, the Sri Lankan Armed Forces launch Operation Liberation, a massive offensive to retake the Jaffna Peninsula. The military pressure is intense.
Very intense.
But this is where the regional geopolitics completely explode, because in June 1987, the Indian Air Force launches Operation Pumalai, They fly military transport aircraft directly into Sri Lankan sovereign airspace to airdrop humanitarian supplies over Jaffna.
Which is a jaw-dropping escalation. You have a massive regional superpower essentially saying, we are halting your military offensive by dropping bread and medicine, and we dare you to shoot down our planes.
It signals that India is no longer just hosting peace talks. They are dropping right into the middle of the battlefield. This plunges us into Checkpoint 7, the third player, the Indian intervention phase.
The timeline here is dense, so let's break down the mechanics of what India was actually trying to achieve. On July 29, 1987, the Indo-Sri Lanka Accord is signed. The very next day, the IPKF, the Indian peacekeeping force, begins arriving.
Let's analyze this through the lens of decision, expectation, and reality. The decision is for India to intervene militarily to stabilize its neighbor and appease its own Tamil population in the southern state of Tamil Nadu.
Right. And the expectation was that the IPKF would arrive, enforce a ceasefire, disarm the militants, and be hailed as peacekeepers.
But the reality shatters that illusion almost instantly. By September 1987, the situation is unraveling. September 26, an LTTE propaganda chief named Thilipan dies while on a hunger strike protesting the IPKF. A few days later, the Sri Lankan Navy intercepts an LTTE boat and captures 17 cadres.
And here is where the LTTE's ruthless internal discipline surfaces again. As those 17 prisoners are being transported to Colombo, they bite down on cyanide capsules and commit suicide.
Just completely fanatical dedication.
Yes. A cascade of violence follows. October 6th, the LTTE executes 8 Sri Lankan police officers they were holding captive. By October 9th, the LTTE is raiding the camps of rival militant groups again, and they ambush a patrol of the CRPF, an Indian paramilitary unit killing 4 Indian personnel.
And on October 10, 1987, the Rubicon is crossed. The LTTE officially commences direct military attacks on the Indian peacekeeping force. The peacekeepers are now an occupying combatant force.
The timeline notes that on October 12, the IPKF launches a heli-landed operation at the Jaffna University ground.
I want to explain why that is so difficult. When you drop troops out of a helicopter into a university campus in the middle of a dense city, you have zero cover.
Yeah.
You are surrounded by snipers who know every single alleyway, rooftop, and sewer grate.
It was a tactical disaster for the IPKF. They took heavy casualties. But by sheer overwhelming force, the Indian military pushes forward. By October 22nd, the Indian forces capture Jaffna town from the LTTE.
But at what cost? It's like stepping into a brutal family feud to break up a fight, only to have both sides suddenly turned and start throwing punches at you.
Exactly. While this bloody urban combat is happening, there are frantic political initiatives. In November 1987, the Sri Lankan parliament passes the 13th Amendment, establishing provincial councils.
To offer some political autonomy.
Right. In 1988, India pours more troops in. They force a merger of the northern and eastern provinces and hold elections, appointing a man named A.V. Perumal as chief minister.
But the friction of having a foreign army occupying your country is just too high for everyone involved. The Sinhalese nationalist groups in the south hate the Indian presence, and the LTTE in the north is fighting a bloody war against them.
And then, by April 1989, an incredible irony occurs. The LTTE actually seeks peace talks with the Sri Lankan government.
Wait, really?
Yes. The presence of the massive Indian third player effectively pushed the 2 original mortal enemies to the same side of the table, purely to get the outsider to leave.
Wow.
By June 1989, they agree to a ceasefire. And in March 1990, realizing the quagmire they are in, the IPKF officially withdraws from Sri Lanka.
The lesson for anyone studying geopolitics here is glaring. External military interventions and deeply rooted ethnic conflicts often unite warring local factions against the outsider.
Yes. And the tragic postscript to this intervention is how quickly the local truce evaporates. The moment the IPKF leaves in 1990, the supposed peace talks between the LTTE and the Sri Lankan government instantly collapse.
By June 1990, the LTTE captures and executes over 600 Sri Lankan police personnel in the eastern province. Just like that, we are thrust into Eelam War IV.
And this phase of the war introduces a chilling new operational strategy: decapitation.
We move from a failed political settlement back to a renewed, brutally asymmetric conflict. From 1990 to 1992, the timeline notes horrifying massacres by both sides. But while the rural war rages, the LTTE shifts its elite tactical focus to the absolute top of the political structures.
Let's look at the staggering timeline of assassinations. May 21st, 1991, an LTTE suicide bomber assassinates the former Indian Prime Minister, Rajiv Gandhi. May 1st, 1993. The sitting Sri Lankan president, R. Premadasa, is assassinated by an LTTE suicide bomber, October 24, 1994. The UNP presidential candidate Gamini Dasaniak is killed by another suicide bomber.
We need to analyze the mechanics of this decapitation strategy. The LTTE utilized a highly specialized unit called the Black Tigers. Suicide bombers are incredibly difficult for a state security apparatus to defend against because the weapon itself is human and the attacker has zero intention of surviving.
Tactically, it is devastating. You create massive political vacuums and you sow terror in the highest echelons of the state.
But I have to question the grand strategy here. What does assassinating someone like Rajiv Gandhi actually achieve for the LTTE on an international scale? Doesn't that just invite the wrath of a massive global player?
You've highlighted the fatal paradox of the LTTE's strategy. Tactically, it eliminated threats. But strategically, it was a massive miscalculation. Assassinating Rajiv Gandhi fundamentally altered international perception.
They lost the PR war.
Completely. The world watched a militant group kill the leader of the world's largest democracy. It began the slow, irreversible transformation of the LTTE's image from freedom fighters to an international terrorist organization.
Despite the assassinations, conventional fighting continues. In November 1993, the LTTE decisively defeats the Sri Lankan army in the Battle of Punaran. Then a political shift occurs in 1994. Chandrika Kumaratunga wins elections on a peace platform.
By January 1995, her government secures a ceasefire. But the trust simply isn't there. The LTTE uses the pause to regroup. By April 1995, the ceasefire breaks down completely.
On April 19, 1995, LTTE frogmen sink 2 Sri Lankan Navy gunboats. The peace talks are dead. But something has changed. After fighting in the shadows with suicide bombers, the LTTE seems to evolve. They don't just want to be an insurgency anymore. They want to fight like a traditional standing army.
This is the conventionalization of an insurgency. In Eelam War IV, which spans from 1995 to roughly 2002, the conflict is defined by massive conventional battles over key geographic choke points.
To understand these battles, we need to build a map memory for the listener. Imagine the northern portion of Sri Lanka. At the very top, sticking out, you have the Jaffna Peninsula. Think of Jaffna as the cultural crown of the north.
Okay, the crown.
Below it, on the mainland, is a dense jungle region called the Vani. This includes towns like Kilinochchi and Mullaitivu. Think of the Vani as the heartland.
And connecting the Vani heartland to the Jaffna crown is a tiny, narrow strip of land, essentially a causeway surrounded by lagoons. That bottleneck is called Elephant Pass, the neck.
Right, the neck. So we have Jaffna as the crown, Elephant Pass as the narrow neck, and the Vani as the heartland. How does Eelam War III play out across this map?
It is a brutal, grinding seesaw. In June 1995, the LTTE goes on the offensive. But the state responds with overwhelming conventional force. By December 1995, the military launches a massive 50-day offensive capturing Jaffna City. The state takes the crown.
But the LTTE doesn't just dissolve. They retreat to the heartland and strike back. In July 1996, they launch a massive assault and overrun the military base at Mullaitivu. The state regroups and, in October 1996, captures Kilinochchi after a punishing 70-day siege.
Now look at the logistics. To supply their troops in the Jaffna crown, the military needs a land route. From 1997 to 1998, they attempt an 18-month operation to open the A9 highway straight through the Vani heartland.
But the operation fails completely. The LTTE has dug in with trenches and artillery. They are proving they can defend territory. In September 1998, the LTTE recaptures Kilinochchi.
It is absolute grueling attrition. And then in the year 2000, we see a tectonic shift at that narrow neck of our mental map. In April 2000, the LTTE captures the heavily fortified military complex at Elephant Pass after 34 days of intense battle.
I want to emphasize how incredible that is from a military standpoint. You have a rebel group that started with stolen rifles, now executing a complex combined arms siege with artillery to capture one of the most fortified bases in South Asia.
It was a stunning conventional victory. By taking Elephant Pass, the LTTE effectively liberated the entire Vani heartland from state military pressure. In April 2001, the state tries to recapture it, and they are repulsed. The ground war has reached a complete stalemate.
And when a guerrilla force realizes the ground war is stalemated, they shift tactics to hit where it hurts most. July 24, 2001. A team of LTTE Black Tigers infiltrates the Bandaranaike International Airport in Colombo.
This is a highly sophisticated raid. They use anti-tank weapons and RPGs. They hit the military airbase, destroying 8 planes. But then they spill over onto the tarmac of the civilian international airport and destroy 3 Sri Lankan Airlines commercial passenger jets.
This isn't just a jungle skirmish. Destroying commercial and military aircraft at an international airport is a massive economic strike. It's a message. We can cripple your national economy and destroy your tourism industry overnight.
And the strategy worked. The economic exhaustion caused by the airport attack, combined with the military deadlock, forced an exhaustion on both sides. On February 22, 2002, a permanent ceasefire is officially signed.
Which brings us to checkpoint 8, the false dawn, or the peace phase analysis. From 2002 to 2005, the guns are mostly silent. In November 2002, the Oslo Declaration is signed, bringing international mediators to the table.
On paper, it looks promising, but if you look closely at the chronology, the fate of the war was completely rewritten during this peace phase, and it had almost nothing to do with what was happening in Oslo.
Right, because two massive events occurred in 2004 that dealt catastrophic blows to the LTTE without a single shot being fired by the Sri Lankan army.
First, March 6, 2004. A senior LTTE commander named V. Muralitharan, widely known as Colonel Karuna Aman, openly rebels against Prabhakar and breaks away. And he takes over 5,000 militant cadres with him.
If you have a permanent ceasefire and the Oslo Declaration, how does a single commander defecting completely rewrite the fate of the war?
Because Karuna was the military commander of the eastern province, Prabhakaran was from the north. By breaking away, Karuna didn't just take 5,000 fighters, he took crucial intelligence about the eastern terrain. He knew where every bunker and weapons cache was.
That's devastating.
It fractured the monolithic image of the LTTE. The internal discipline had finally cracked.
That was the internal fracture. But the second blow came from the outside. December 26, 2004. The Indian Ocean earthquake triggers the tsunami that massively damages LTTE infrastructure.
Yes, specifically their naval wing, the Sea Tigers. The tsunami wiped out their naval logistics capacity in a single afternoon. Nature and internal friction achieved what the military had struggled to do for decades.
By 2005, the political landscape in the South hardens. In November, Mahinda Rajapaksa, running on a hardline nationalist stance, is elected president.
The pieces are now perfectly set for the final endgame. You have a weakened LTTE and a new leadership in Colombo prepared for a definitive military solution.
We are entering checkpoint 9, the vice. Eelam War IV, the final phase. From 2006 to 2009, it's a systematic dismantling. In May 2006, the European Union officially declares the LTTE a terrorist organization.
The diplomatic net closes. That cuts off massive international funding.
And the physical trigger. In July 2006, the LTTE closes the sluice gates of the Mevelaru waterway, cutting off water supply to farmers. The state uses this to launch massive offensives.
By October 2006, the Supreme Court voids the merger of the Northeast province.
With the East legally separated, the military moves in. In 2007, utilizing intelligence from the Karuna defectors, the armed forces take complete control of the eastern province.
Textbook military strategy. Clear your flank first. Now they can turn 100% of their military might toward the northern heartland.
By 2008, the northern offensive pushes into the Vani. The LTTE fights desperately, scoring a brief victory at Mahamalai, but the military momentum is unstoppable. By November, state forces capture Punarin and Mankalam.
And then, 2009, the map shrinks with terrifying speed. January 2, the military captures Kilinochchi. The rebels retreat to the Maledivu jungles.
They are completely boxed into the Vani pocket at Pudukujiripu.
It was a methodical strangulation. Cut off international support, reclaim the east, shrink the map in the north.
Let's break down the military victory using 5 pillars based on the sources.
Pillar 1, leadership. Coordinated, relentless offensives. Pillar 2, terrain. Clearing the east first, then squeezing the north. Pillar 3, technology and resources. State forces overpowering a depleted LTTE. Pillar 4, diplomacy, the EU terrorism designation. And Pillar 5, splintering, leveraging the Karuna faction's absence.
So it wasn't just overwhelming firepower. It was a methodical strangulation until there was nowhere left to hide. In April 2009, at the Battle of Anandapuram, 600 Tigers are killed. The command structure is decimated.
And on May 18, 2009, Prabhakaran is killed. The conflict officially ends.
Having walked through thousands of years of history and 4 distinct phases of modern warfare, it's time to consolidate this knowledge.
Let's verbally construct a comparative framework. Eelam War I was triggered by Black July. The strategy was guerrilla ambush and state reprisal. The outcome was internationalization, drawing India in.
Right.
Eelam War II triggered by the IPKF exit. The strategy was high-profile decapitation with suicide bombers. The outcome, the LTTE, becomes an international pariah.
Eelam War III, triggered by the 1995 gunboat sinking. The strategy shifts to conventional territorial warfare. The outcome is a military stalemate and the 2002 ceasefire.
And Eelam War IV, triggered by the Mamel Aru water dispute. The strategy is total military annihilation. The outcome is the destruction of the LTTE.
For rapid recall hooks, top turning points: 1956 language policy, 1983 Black July, 2004 Karuna split and tsunami. Top locations: Jaffna the Crown, Elephant Pass the Gateway, Kilinochchi the Stronghold, and the Vandy Pocket the Final Stand.
Exactly. If you need to deploy these dates, use 1948, 1956, and 1970 to explain political alienation. Use the 1987 Accord and 2006 EU ban to explain diplomatic factors. And use the 2000 Elephant Pass battle and 2004 tsunami to explain the military shift.
We've covered so much ground today. The chronology absolutely shows that a military victory can definitively end an armed insurgency.
It does, but I want to leave the listener with a final provocative thought to mull over.
Let's hear it.
The military victory in 2009 ended the armed insurgency. However, if that military victory does not address the original political and legislative triggers from 1948 and 1956, the very things that sparked the militancy in the first place, can the underlying identity conflict truly be considered resolved, or is it simply silenced?
Wow. That is the ultimate question. We encourage you, the listener, to use the mental maps, cause-effect chains, and rapid recall questions generated today to solidify your grasp on this subject. Thanks for taking this deep dive into the architecture of historical conflict. End of deep dive.